Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning into the Marriage is Tougher Than Woodpecker Lips podcast. This is Brian, joined by my co-host, Paul. We'd like to welcome you to a community meant for the men of the world to share their thoughts and perspectives on marriage. We can learn from each other's experiences and help each other be better husbands. This week on the pod, we'd like to talk to you about what's appropriate in marriage. And we're going to dive into the definition and a couple thoughts, maybe a little bit of a thought experiment, on what we really mean by that.
Yeah, and before we get into the episode, just wanted to say, hey, if this is your first time finding the pod, welcome. And if you've been a listener, welcome back. We appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. If you would like to connect in community, please reach out to marriagestougher.com, which is our website. And if you'd like to be a guest, there's a form there that you can fill out. But also, if you want to hit us on our socials, searching Marriage is Tougher, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. We would love to continue conversations or have conversations with you there. If you have any questions or you'd like to be a guest, you can reach out to us on either spot, or you can slide into the DMs on IG, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. All right, let's get into this episode. So I was listening to a podcast on leadership, and the concept of appropriateness and appropriate hopped up. And so in the middle of the podcast, I'm like, what does really inappropriate mean, right? Because I understood what appropriate was. And inappropriate surprised me. And I'll just read the definition and you can see if it kind of resonated with you or not. But appropriate is suitable or proper in the circumstance. Makes sense, right? Appropriate is whatever you should do. Inappropriate is simply not suitable or proper in the circumstance. So it's just a not in front of appropriate. How did you think inappropriate was before that definition? And now that you hear it, do you have any thoughts on inappropriate?
That's a good question. And it's funny because my daughter's often asking me to define words. So I'm trying to put myself in that space where if my daughter had asked me prior to me hearing the actual definition, how would I have answered that? I think if I had to define appropriate and inappropriate, it's probably going to be pretty similar. Like as me saying, this is the definition, and this is like inappropriate is just the opposite of it, right? And I think I would have held pretty true to how the definition reads. And when I think about like what's appropriate in life, in marriage, in the workplace, I think back to this book I listened to. It was a short book, but the author was interviewing one of the like leaders in a very large company, and she was mentioning how she wanted to change the dress code, and it read something along the lines of, don't wear anything that's inappropriate, right? And there was a bunch of pushback from the people who worked there, some of the higher ups saying like the dress code has to be like more elaborate than that. It can't just be don't wear things that aren't appropriate. And she pushed back and said, well, why? Like, give me reasons why it needs to be like this 10-page document about what the dress code is. And they were like, well, that's just not appropriate. And she was like, right. Like if you can't come up with a better word than statement that's just not appropriate. And they're like, well, people will start wearing this and that. And she was like, okay, so you just feel like that wouldn't be appropriate? Then say as much and it'll change. So I don't know if I really answered your question or not, but
Yeah, I would say you did answer and saying you would probably hold true to the definition, which is good for me. The definition makes sense once you read it and understand the English language. But for me, inappropriate would not seem so simple, right? Or the contrast would not seem so simple. For me, it seems like it would have to be almost egregious, right? So in my brain, prior to looking up the definition, I would use an example like if it's 5 a.m. and I start playing the drums in my house, that's clearly inappropriate for the situation, right? Um, and even dress code, right? Like, even that example would be something that you go from like, uh, a blank t-shirt to a t-shirt that has like a hate group on it, but not if it just said like McDonald's, right? But that would be inappropriate if you were working at Wendy's and you came
Yeah,
in with a
yeah,
McDonald's shirt, right? So it's not egregious, it's just improper for the circumstance. So any other any other place that you wore that McDonald's shirt, no big deal. But if you walk in and you're now serving at Wendy's, that's not appropriate for it. Um, but I don't know if I would have thought that as I wouldn't not have used inappropriate maybe in that space of the shirt because it didn't seem as egregious as like
mm,
say something that totally disrupts. Inappropriate for me is something that totally disrupts, but as I'm thinking through it now, it's just something that is very subtle and um, really just shouldn't be there, but it doesn't have to be a sledgehammer, if that
yeah.
makes sense.
No, I mean, I'm thinking back to high school when we were at a concert at a local college before we knew how to whisper. I wonder if you remember this event where your sisters are sitting behind us and they're like, everyone can hear you talking to each other.
I don't remember the specific event, but I remember it happening often. So that could have been
Yeah,
anywhere.
yeah. They're like, yo, you're not whispering just because you're talking quietly doesn't mean you're whispering. And so in that moment, we were being inappropriate, um, but unknowingly.
hmm
Um, so I'm thinking, like, if we bring this to marriage, how many times have we been inappropriate, um, or how many times have our wives thought we are being inappropriate in any situation, and we've been doing it unknowingly? And what does that conversation look like to correct a inappropriate event or occurrence? Um, and how do we have that conversation if we feel our wife is being inappropriate? And this is my my main point, without hurt feelings.
Um, man, full transparency, the cynic in me says that's impossible. But I know that is not true, or maybe it is true. Like there might be hurt feelings, but it would be quickly remedied, if that makes sense, right? Because I think in both of our relationships, we're growing in a space where our feelings, we use our feelings as information, but we don't hold it or hold people hostage to how they either made us feel or how bad we may have made someone feel, if that makes sense. In essence, we've learned how to work through those uncomfortables, or we're learning how to work through those situations. Um, but to say, how do we do that? I think it's having a conversation about the simple nature of what appropriate and inappropriate really means. And so if we were to use that word, um, it doesn't mean that something's egregious. But even if we take the word out, if we if we are doing something unsuitable for the circumstance, how will we receive that um, if our wives address us? And I think it's being open to knowing that we're not perfect and being teachable. Like most things that we say, it's a mindset shift. Like knowing we're not going to be perfect. Don't beat yourself up if you're not. And how can we move forward? How can I teach me what's proper in that situation?
I got you. I'm going to put you in a scenario. I know this wouldn't happen, but I want to see how you might handle it.
All right, go.
You're getting ready to step out. You got dinner plans, and your wife comes down the stairs in an outfit that is how you would deem inappropriate. How do you approach that without hurt feelings? Um, how do you speak to your wife and uh, express how, and it doesn't have to be specifically, the how she's dressed, but that she's doing something. Like what kind of words are we using here in order to,
Oh
I'm
man, I'm
trying to
a
speak.
visual person and watching it play out in my head and full thing is trying to figure out, do I just say that would look really good on the floor, aka we don't have to go to dinner.
Right.
But past that, the seriousness of that, um, oh, that's a really good question. Um, I'm trying to work through it as, like you said, my wife is very conscious about her outfits. So I'm trying to
Right.
think, have I ever been in this scenario? Um, you know,
Yeah, man.
it's interesting. I think it's asking her, maybe, I have no idea. I mean, because I'd be like, what? I think I'm thinking like, what does she like about the outfit? How does she feel in the outfit? Um,
Right.
and it may be, if it is something that she really loves, how inappropriate is it, if that makes
Mhm.
sense? Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, if we're going to a football game and she doesn't have a jacket, like there's,
Right.
hey, it's only 33 degrees. Like you're going to need a jacket. Like this is not the right outfit. Right. So I kind of went the wrong way, but if I'm using the words, let's think about what's proper for the circumstance. Right.
Right.
So if we're going to a football game, we're not wearing a cocktail dress.
Yeah.
So we have to remember, that's what I'd start asking, like, hey, remember we're going to such and such. And this is what it is. Are you going to be cold? Are you going to be hot? Are you going to be comfortable? Should something happen, are you ready to sprint out of there in that outfit? Like, I think that's kind of where I would go. Um, but I definitely would be like, you need to take that off. That's terrible. That's not the approach.
Nah, I hear that. And I think you kind of hit the point I was trying to get to. Because you said initially you felt like inappropriate was something egregious, but I think you just, excuse me, demonstrated very well that maybe it's just like this outfit or what you're wearing isn't going to keep you comfortable where we're going. So the outfit is inappropriate, right? And it could be even something with children, right? Like that maybe they're a little bit too loud for church or something along those lines, right? So your volume is inappropriate, which seems like a small thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a parent, you could be embarrassed or whatever the case may be, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what they're saying is inappropriate, but just this small thing, the volume, bring it down a couple notches. Um, so there's a ton of different things that could be inappropriate in any moment. I think you have to decide how far do you need to go to to set boundaries and all of those things. Um, but I think it's just kind of like part of living life together and figuring each other out. Like, what are each other's tastes when it comes to an inappropriate outfit for my wife? You know, my mind was going more towards like that's like far too sexy for you to be wearing that out where we're going, right? And I think that I'm not probably not going to be so blunt where it's like no, just no, take no change, right? Um, but it would deserve a conversation of I understand that makes you feel a certain type of way, but do you need to get that feeling from other people? Am I not making you feel the way you want to feel in our like day-to-day life, right? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I think that's for me where my conversation would go to. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think in when we talk about suitable or not suitable or proper in a circumstance, when we address it, we have to be ready for a real conversation because your example right there could lead to, what if you get the answer that you didn't want to get? What if she says, no, you don't let me feel like, I don't feel like you
Right.
make me feel this way. Um, then it's like, oh, like we have to stop and really have this or table this and really come back and have this real conversation about what is or what isn't going on. So I think that is what needs to happen as we um, talk about those situations when we're ready to it. Really, when you're ready to address anything, be ready for the answer that you want and the answer that you may not want, and
Right.
then
Right.
figure out how if we have time to talk about this right now, or are we going to need to table this? But it's all good discovery and it's good communication.
Yeah. So it looks like I'm having some technical difficulties over here. Um, Not sure what the reason is, but I think it was a good conversation. Um, and I know you got a roll. So do you want to close this out and maybe I'll just summarize in the cliff notes.
Yeah, just say make sure that we don't go to extremes in our marriages, right? And something as little as a word inappropriate really like it challenged me on my thought process. So again, I think something I said earlier, just be open to learn and be willing to be taught in life and in your marriage. There may be something that your wife, you may think you're doing, it might not be a big deal, but your wife may want to see some change and just be open for it. Um, I know I try to be. It doesn't always feel good, but it's working to be better and to be who your wife needs you to be so that your marriage can be what you want it to be. And I think that's something we should always be open for. So, um, yeah, thanks for listening. If you got anything out of this episode, please leave a comment in the comments or hit us up on Instagram or Facebook or slide over to marriageistougher.com and fill out the form and leave um, a contact comment there. So thank you so much again. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.
Peace.
See ya.